Hello, and welcome to Crushing Classical, redefining a thriving classical music career. On today's Fireside Chat, Eileen and I discuss change in classical music. What will it take? What will save it? We also discuss making classical music relevant in today's world, among other action items. And then we get to talking about a project that my husband started. It was an event that we created, and I ended up helping out with it a lot. He was interested in creating an income stream outside of his job and his teaching, a side hustle. So Eileen and I discuss all the details of that, what it was like, how much work it was. At a certain point toward the end of the chat, I admit it. I didn't want to talk about it anymore. Creating something like that from scratch was not easy, and the topic at times feels a little sensitive still. So after the call, Eileen could sense that something was off, and she asked me about it. So we got back on the call and recorded an after the show, which I'll attach to the end of the Fireside Chat so you guys know what was going on. Stay tuned to hear the very ending where we get on a call and talk about what was going on in my head while she inquired about all the ins and outs of starting a side hustle with my husband. Yikes. Okay, here we go.
Good
Hey, Eileen.
morning. What's happening?
Not a
Here we
lot.
are.
It's a sunny day here.
It is. It's a sunny day here too. It's probably like almost 80 outside now because Phoenix in March. That's what it is. I already have my air conditioning on. Good Lord. So, so I have to jump in because the first thing everybody missed this morning was the text flurry that went between us at, I think it was like 5:30 in the morning my time ish.
Can I just say I'm glad I'm the one who's further ahead in the time zones because this partnership might be harder if I was, waking up at five. I wouldn't be waking up at 5 in the
At
morning.
5. I know people
You'd
think
be
I'm
like,
nuts.
yeah, and you'd be like, it's noon. Are
Yeah,
you up
I
yet? And
don't.
I'd
You know what? I don't feel this is pathetic, but I don't feel productive unless I wake up when it's dark. It's pathetic, for real.
It's amazing.
No, but you know what? This has been true for a really. Something happened when I decided to become self-employed and stop receiving a paycheck. Was that I suddenly productivity looked different to me, and I felt like and this I'm not bragging about this. This is just how it feels. I haven't slept the same, so when you have to create your own income, it just changes. When the paycheck isn't coming every 2 weeks, you just have a different level of, I don't know, get out of bedness, anxiety, get out of bedness. That's like a word now. You
Yeah.
just have a different, I can't explain it. You have a different drive. It's an urgency that wasn't there before. When I had a paycheck, it's a different, there's definitely anxiety there, no question. And it's been there forever now. That's all I know at this point.
Wow. Yeah.
I
I
don't think
get that.
it's good. It's just what it is. You know,
Right.
I can't label it good or bad. It's just present.
Right.
you know and what my
Right.
one of my biggest fears is that if I ever got a job, that would go away, that my level of urgency and my level of give a shit and my level of caring about anything would um, diminish if I ever accepted a paycheck.
Yeah, I get that. I get that because of the word you just mentioned, urgency. I want
Hmm.
to talk about urgency.
Yep.
And this goes along the lines, and I don't want to open up a can of worms off the planned schedule of things that we're going to talk about today. But
Yeah.
when you talk about this, it makes me think of nonprofits and the orchestra world and how sometimes there's not a whole lot of reason to move when
Yeah.
things are being taken care of by somebody else,
Yep.
and in a job, not to say that jobs aren't important because they are, but that when you have a job and you're getting a certain salary, you just have to show up and do the thing you're supposed to do and you'll get the money no matter what. So
Yeah.
it's a different kind of mindset. It totally is.
Yep, it totally is. And speaking of nonprofits, one of the things that we texted about back and forth today, this whole idea of, um, I think people look at nonprofits and they look at nonprofits and they say those people are going to change the world, and that's how they think of themselves. We're going to change the world. That's what, it's a bunch of, do-gooders in an office or in a building or whatever, and we're gonna make change. That's the same thing with politicians. It's always
Mhm.
about, but the crowd is sort of waiting around for change to happen. And at the same time, nonprofit, I'll just speak to nonprofits. I'm not going to talk about politicians because I think that's another topic. But nonprofits are, we're waiting for nonprofits to make change. They know it's their job to make change, but they're sitting there waiting for people to give them money so they can make change. It's a very weird thing to me how that works.
I was always really uncomfortable with that when I learned about that. That's how orchestras were. I was like, I don't understand. You mean like, I mean, again, it speaks to my really great ability to do math or even analyze how something could be possible, but
To do math. Right.
but but like looking at an orchestra when I found out that everything was based on getting a big gift from somebody. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, wow, you have to just beg people for money all day in order for this to survive. Like, I just felt uncomfortable about it. Like, what happens when people stop giving money? Then what happens, you know?
Well, and the other thing I'll say too, I don't know if when I was in Chicago Youth Symphony, which you and I were in together, not one time was I aware of that it was a nonprofit organization. Were you aware of that?
No, I didn't
No,
even know what that
I didn't
was.
even know what that was. There was an orchestra. I auditioned for it. I showed up. I got, I got a spot in it, and then I played in it, and it was fun. And I didn't think about that there was money behind it, that there were people supporting it. And I mean, never mind the fact that it's written all over the frickin' program in every concert we play. Thank you so much to our donors and supporters. But I never, ever once paid any mind to that when I was in it. Not one time.
Think of it once. I didn't even
No.
know if I didn't know, nor did I ever question whether or not our conductor got paid. It just didn't occur to me.
Oh, and you know what's funny about this actually translates, it's pathetic, right? But it translates also over to how musicians think today. Classical musicians is who I'm speaking about. That's how they live today. How classical musicians live today is, I show up, I play, I know because I'm an adult and I'm older now, I understand that the organization that pays me, assuming you have a job, is a nonprofit organization, and we get support and we get donations, and we get, I get paid by a salary that's paid by supporters and people who support the organization. But, you know, nowhere in there is the musician necessarily creating anything. They're showing up, they're playing, they're going home. That's it.
Yep. Yeah.
You know, the magic is happening somewhere behind the scenes. There's a bunch of people that have jobs that are trying to bring money into that organization so it can continue to sustain itself.
Yeah. To be honest, I didn't really start to understand how it worked until I got to North Carolina Symphony and I was here for a few years and started hanging around with people who were on committees and they would tell me a little bit about, how it worked. And it was
Yeah.
very interesting.
Yeah. And I just, and these were sort of the conversations that were going back and forth on text this morning about how, I think everybody's waiting around. I don't think, I know. Classical musicians are waiting around for this whole thing to change. Classical music to change, like I think I wrote you some rant this morning about how, people are essentially, I think classical musicians think that there's going to be some renaissance at some point. Like people are just going to wake up one day and go, wow, classical music is amazing. And I want to hear Mozart and this is awesome. And like some hurricane's going to come through and get rid of the stigma that is associated with classical. And everyone's just going to love it again. And that's just not going to happen. It's not going to happen.
You're right. And musicians, unfortunately, think, even if they don't think that consciously, their behavior shows that they think
Oh,
that.
totally. It's 100% in their behavior. 100%.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting because, you post a lot of things on the page right now that are kind of controversial, actually. A lot of the things that you say, or excuse me, that you write are I mean, they're thought provoking, they're also controversial, and the audience is just quiet. The people
Yeah.
who have liked your page are just quiet. They have nothing to say. I'm waiting for a debate on the page. Honestly, I'm waiting for somebody to step up and disagree or step up and add something or whatever. At some point, you have to step up. Your voice has to be heard. You cannot just communicate through your instrument. You've got to communicate some other way. And that's really what I think Crushing Classical is aiming to do.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, it's funny because really classical music is the most polite genre that there is. Think about the audience. Think
Yeah.
about how a classical concert happens. Everyone needs to be quiet.
Hmm.
Silence your cell phones. Don't share that you're having this experience on social media because it's against the rules of the contract. You must
Hmm.
keep your phones off and in your purse at all times. You
Don't
know,
clap at intermission.
don't clap at yeah, don't clap in
I
between
mean, in
moves.
between movements. Sorry, not intermission, but don't clap in between movements. Yep.
Yeah, you can clap in intermission if you want.
Yeah,
Go
exactly.
ahead,
But
clap the
go
whole
ahead,
time.
clap. That you can clap at intermission and at the end of the concert, and that's it. You can't clap at any other time. It's there. There's
Yeah.
definitely a politeness, and that's what I see in the audience right now. Is everybody's just really quiet. I see likes on the posts. I see, every once in a while I see a comment. It's always really encouraging to see a comment, but at some point, classical musicians have to get involved in this conversation of change. It is not going to change because look, we're leading the change for classical music. I'm clear about that. That's what we're here for. But it's not just going to be us that changes it. It's going to be you getting involved in the discussions to change it. That's what it needs. It requires it. It's not going to change any other way,
Totally. Totally.
you know?
Yeah, because it's up to each person. That's one of the things we were saying back and forth today on text, and it was funny because I was trying to like have this rant with you and I was all fired up and then I'm trying to get Violet ready for school and um
I know I noticed the time and I was like, this is probably not a good time for me to text her this. She said, this is
Yeah.
probably not a good time. She's probably like, trying to get Violet to shove food in her mouth before she goes to school,
Yeah.
you
I'm
know.
like trying to get her shoes on and I'm like, "Yeah, that's true, Eileen,"
I know.
but like
I picked the worst time to start a rant on text.
I know, but when a rant comes, you can't stop it.
Mm-mm. I know. Well, as evidenced by the 20 pages of text I sent you this morning,
Yeah.
which,
But it's true. It does have to be each individual person has to decide how they want to affect change in the classical world. So far all we've had to do, or all we've chosen to do, or just historically what we do is show up and play and leave. It's like almost like clocking in.
well, it is clocking in. And the other thing is, I think classical musicians are waiting for orchestras to change it. No, it's the other way around. You're going to change it. Orchestras are not. There's certain, I don't know, we were talking a little bit about, there are existing agreements in the world for things. There's an existing agreement that an orchestra is going to show up at a certain venue and they're going to play. There's a, there are things, people are going to come, they're going to sit in the audience, they're going to clap at certain moments. All these agreements exist. I think for classical music to evolve and go in a forward direction instead of standing still or moving backwards is for us to actually look at those agreements and either break them, make new ones, something. Change isn't going to happen because you continue doing the same thing. You actually have to get up and do something different. And no one's going to make you do that. You have to decide for yourself that that's what you're going to do in your own career, but also if you actually want something to change in orchestras or how orchestras are run or their repertoire, whatever it is, you have to impact it. You have to impact it. Change isn't stopping you, you're stopping you.
Exactly. And it's your hands can look very tied when you're in an orchestra because the people who decide whether or not something gets changed are people who are working On the management side, there's two sides. There's the players and there's the management. The musicians think that they're the most important part of the organization because they're playing the music, but that's not how the management thinks.
Mm.
So the management is in charge of any kind of change, and why would they necessarily be motivated to change it? They're working a job too, where they get paid,
Yeah, I
and
was going to say there is no, I don't, as far as I know in the nonprofit world, there is no pay on performance. So pay on performance, like,
no,
you get paid according to the results you produce.
definitely not. And the people who they're trying to appease are the people who give money. So if you think that the richest person in the city who is going to give you money is interested in change,
Hmm.
that's where you have to ask yourself. It goes back to the money and who's going to give the money. It's not
Hmm.
about making something better, something revolutionary, something freaking awesome.
Well,
It's
yeah,
about
and
keeping
that's an
that.
existing agreement. That's exactly what I'm talking. You're pointing to right now. That's an existing agreement. We'll give you money if you do fill in the blank.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Like there's an expectation there. We'll give you money in return. It could be an unspoken thing. You're going to continue to play. You're going to do a certain series. You're going to play Rachmaninoff. You're going to play Mozart 3 times a year. I don't know what the agreements are, but those agreements exist. That's why musicians actually have to change classical music. Orchestras aren't going to do it because they're bound to whatever agreement exists where money is exchanged.
Yep.
That's the way that works. So the only people who are going to change it are musicians, period. That's, every classical musician listening to this chat right now needs to understand, you guys need to understand this. The only way it's going to change or anything is going to change in this thing we call classical music is if you do it. You wait
Yes.
around, you can either make it relevant or you can become irrelevant. That's it.
Absolutely. And it's hard to see how things can change within an organization that already exists, that's been going on the same way for 75 years, 100 years sometimes in certain orchestras.
Hmm.
And, that's why I love orchestras like New Deco Ensemble in Miami, who's just they started from scratch. They started their own thing,
Hmm.
and there's
Yep.
more orchestras like that around. There's the Knights in Brooklyn, and
Yep.
there's several other ones, not that many, but there are a few. And in order for things to change, it's truly has to come from musicians. It really does.
Well, it doesn't, and I want to. This is a really good segue, actually, because one thing we said we were going to talk about today was crushing classical and the start of it. So when you and I started talking, oh gosh, I mean, it was a year ago. Now, I think it was about a year
It's
ago.
about a year ago.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And I don't remember who came up with it first. Well, I mean, I knew that you were dissatisfied in your career. You weren't whining about it, but you were like, I know that there's something else for me and I don't know what it is. And we started getting into these discussions. I mean, do you have any, obviously you were there. Do you have any, um, I guess, comments on how we ended up going this direction?
I knew that there was more for me. I had no idea what that would look like. Um, I was pretty sure I didn't want to hit the audition track again.
Yeah, that was pretty clear.
Yeah, I know so much about the orchestra business now that I wasn't, being stupid about the fact that it would be different in another place
Yeah.
anymore. I'd seen enough of them.
Right.
And so,
Yep.
and I like where I live, and David has a great job that he likes. And I was just like, well, I don't know what it looked, I have no idea what it looked, I couldn't see options. And
Hmm.
you coming from the place where you have been for the last 15 years, you could see different options that I couldn't see. And so
Hmm.
we started talking about it like that. And you had a couple of different ideas, and they bounced back and forth. And it was funny, the evolution of what it started as to what it is right now.
Hmm.
It's very different. And it's really exciting. And like the whole concept of evolution, like we'd been talking about, and I'd been writing on posts, like um, just, the evolution of my entire career, but also just from where Crushing Classical started as Hornwise. Initially, you said, you could help parents figure out how to navigate the whole idea of getting into school for a
Music
scholarship because
school. Yeah. Hmm.
parents want their kids to get scholarships, and
Yep.
what is needed for that, So I
Yeah,
thought,
there's definitely
about
it's fun. It's funny. Like I have a knack for knowing what could make money because I know what people buy. I know what they will buy. I know what they want. Most people don't tune into that at all. What people want and what people will pay for. So I have a knack for that. But I have another side to me. So there's that practical side, but then there's another side, which is but you want to differentiate yourself far above, like you want to lead a much bigger, higher level conversation than what normal people would lead. So, um, you know, I'll say a few things about the people who are teaching. I'm going to call it audition hacking. There are people, I know that there's other people to listen to in the classical music, podcast world and, you know, and just in general, like becoming a better classical musician or whatever you want to call that. I'll call it classical musician self-help. I don't know what else to call it.
that.
There's conversations, hacking auditions, taking auditions better, you know, like the practical side of being a classical music player, playing whatever instrument you play. And there's that practical side, and people will pay for that. They will. They'll pay for anything that improves their skill level, especially. They will definitely pay for that. But I knew that there was a larger conversation that could be had here that was far above just fixing playing problems, audition problems, the everyday problems of being a classical musician. And I think, that was really where I wanted you to go, if I'm being honest. But whether or not you chose to go, that was your choice to go there or not. And I don't think I'm not sure that initially you saw that or wanted to do that.
um I don't. So I remember that as Hornwise
Excuse me.
progressed and I started talking about careers and just what it was like to have a career in classical music. And then when I had the idea, so it still sort of felt nebulous to me, like, it could be this, it could be that, Hornwise, is it for horns only, or what
Hmm.
it, like, there wasn't a whole lot of clarity for me, and it felt very uncomfortable just because it was the first time I was actually being public about posting. Like I really wasn't a big social media person before, as far as like I hardly ever posted on my profile page at all.
Hmm.
And I didn't
You were
even have
probably
an
you're
Instagram account.
probably a big lurker. You just lurked, right? That's what most people do.
Yeah, I would just look on my feed
Hmm.
and scroll through it, and I didn't know how to control what would end up in there, so I'd get irritated and be like, "Ah, I don't care about that," or whatever, and then I would
Sure.
just at times I would want to quit Facebook because I was tired of seeing political stuff, or just stuff like that. And so I just really wasn't a social media, I wasn't interested in it
Hmm.
very much. And then but then when I decided, or when I said, "Hey, Eileen, I'm seeing all these people who are doing different things in classical. It might be fun to have a podcast someday." And
Hmm.
that was when you were like, "Do it right now," and that was
Yeah.
one of the first times where I was like, "Oh shit, like I'm doing
Yep.
something that I don't know how to do, and I'm declaring that it's happening." So
Well,
that felt
and
uncomfortable.
it did. I remember that, and I also remember that we decided on, was it October 10th? Was that the date?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah. So October 10th. I mean, you just picked a date out of the sky. I think it was like 3 weeks or 4 weeks ahead, maybe something.
Mhm. Yeah, it was like 3 weeks.
It was like
And
3 weeks. Hmm.
you said all you need to do is pick a date and email 5 people who you want to interview. And that felt weird, to email people and say, "Hey, I have a podcast coming out," when the only evidence of actually me having a podcast coming out was that I said it.
Yep, that was it. And then we came up with questions, I think, ahead of time.
Mhm.
Um, I know you had an initial list of questions. We messed around with that, and then you were. I think your first podcast. I think it went really well. It was somebody that you knew already.
That was really helpful, Giacomo. It was really helpful that, he was a friend and he's super social and easy to talk to. So it was really fun. And I was nervous too, but it went really well for being a first time thing of me
Hmm.
interviewing somebody.
Yeah, and then you sort of, I mean, I just remember that all of a sudden you had all these interviews lined up. Like right after that first one, you're like, oh, I have another one. Oh, I have another one. And I thought, oh, she's really going to do this. Holy crap, you know. Um,
Yeah,
just doing one, gave you momentum to do what was, the next one,
right.
you know. And I think that's important for anyone who's thinking about, whatever it is you're thinking about. You just got to start. I don't. There's no right way. I mean, hell, we're probably not going to get these fireside chats together properly until, I don't know. Listen to us 2 months from now. I don't. You know, this is the first fireside chat where we've had kind of a thought about what exactly we want to talk about, because you and I usually get on a call and we just talk about a lot of things, you know.
Right.
And so we're not getting it right either. I'll probably declare we've gotten it right 6 months from now, maybe
Right.
ish. I don't know. So, but you got to start with, the declaration. What is the date that you're going to start, whatever that thing is? And I've had many conversations with people since then about stuff they want to do. I do this a lot. I get on the phone with people and they have, there's some idea or some concept or something they have, and it may or may not work. I can certainly tell you if it's viable. We'll talk about viability in a minute, but I can tell you if it's viable, if people will pay for it, if people want it. But beyond that, the next thing you have to do is declare a date, and then you have to, you start. That's the date that you start. And it's not a year from now. It's like a week from now or 2 weeks from now or something. It's close. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
hell, it could be today. But in most cases, for whatever reason, people need, a week or two to digest what the hell they just said they're going to do.
Yeah, and what's funny is that this theme showed up a lot in my interviews because when I'm interviewing people who have done some cool stuff or are doing cool stuff, they'll say similar things to this, like, "Oh, I just started." Or
Mhm.
one time I was interviewing this violinist named Chloe Trevor, and she told me about a video that she decided to do for Halloween, and Halloween was like in 2 weeks or a week or something.
Mhm.
And she needed to find a ballerina because she had this idea of having a dancer. And, she said, and she told me about the Leonard Bernstein quote, like what you need is a plan and not quite enough time
Yeah,
or
that's a
something.
great
And
quote. Yeah, what you need is a plan and not quite enough time. That's exactly. And what's really funny too, I think, in the 3 weeks leading up to your initial podcast, I think for 2 weeks you bellyached over it, and for the last week you were like, "Oh shit!" And then you had to do all this stuff to get it together. Am I wrong? Except I think you emailed people. I think you did email people and say, "Hey, I want to interview you."
I no, I emailed lots of people and I was researching how to do a podcast, and with every Google search I got a different list of things you can do.
Hmm.
And because there's a million different ways you can do a podcast.
Yeah, and you
And
got
so
to find the platform, and you got right all that.
yeah,
Hmm.
because a lot of, and if you Google it and you find an article and you don't realize it's from 2012, well, that's not going to give you the right, stuff, most up to date ways of doing things.
Right. So then you're learning how to research at the same time. How to Google research properly?
Exactly. And so I was doing that. And then, I have a good friend who's had a podcast for 10 years, Jason Heath, and he has a contrabass podcast called Contrabass Conversations. And he was an immense help, So just reaching out to friends who are also doing similar things
Hmm.
is one way you can research. And so, so he had written some articles for another website, and they were very clear, like, this is what I use, so this is how I did it. And at a certain point, I think you and I were talking, you said you just have to pick something and do it. You're not going to find the right one. Every article is going to say this is how you do it, and you not
Hmm.
find 10 of those and they're all different.
Yep.
You just have to pick one and try it and see how it goes.
Hmm. And I think that's what you ended up doing with
Yes,
Zencat. Yep. And I know you
exactly.
had some issues. I mean, I know there were some technical issues along the way because it was in beta when you started using it.
Exactly. And I was ready to can it. And then I was talking to you again, and you were like, that this is technology. It's nothing's going to be perfect. If
Mm-mm.
you switch to another thing, you might have issues on that one too, so that was a good
Yep.
point to realize as well.
Yeah.
And I managed to fix it, like shit would happen and then I would go, oh, maybe there's a way I can fix this. Like I did that interview with Two Set Violin, and
Hmm.
that was a really great one because I was so excited about them since I had been following them for a little while, and they said that they would do the interview, and I lost the last 5 minutes of it somehow, and I emailed the owner of Zencaster, and he was like, I don't know, this is a glitch. Happened to like one other person, and it's very rare, but it can happen, and then I started doing more research, and on his frequently asked questions portion said, the original will be on the person who you interviewed on their computer if it's there. And so I emailed, I said, and I followed the directions and I said, hey, if you can email me an MP3 with this link and da da da, and it was there. So I was
Hmm.
able to get it and have a friend produce it for me.
Yeah,
And
so
then I
part of it is, solving the problems along the way. Actually, I one thing I want to dive into, I want to talk about, since we're talking about this, uh, I want to talk about the workshop that you guys just got done doing. So, do you mind if I talk about this now? Does this work?
This works, and we should back it up to when you came to visit me in December and how it was born, how the workshop
So
was
yeah,
born.
and we had been so here's the story. The story is that I was having a conversation with Tracy's husband, who was doing what, how do I say this? He was hired to lead like a chamber music program that is in Raleigh, and he was dissatisfied with that experience.
Yeah.
Let me just say it like that. So he's a violinist, and he was dissatisfied. So he wanted to create something outside of being in the orchestra, North Carolina Symphony, and also outside of this chamber group that he was doing. He was generally dissatisfied, wanted to do something else. He was a typical classical musician, has a job but not fulfilled. I think that's pretty normal. So,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Can we be straight about this? He just wasn't. He
He
wasn't
wanted
completely.
more. He
Yeah,
wanted
he wanted
something
more.
created. And he wanted to, he was working for this other, it was a youth chamber music, essentially a group that was for for children, for kids who
Right.
want to learn chamber music, strings. And so he said, I want to do that for myself. I want to create my own chamber music program so that I can run it and I can choose, how the schedule goes and all this other stuff.
Yeah, and we started talking about this in November, and so we thought that he was going to start his own chamber program, basically like youth chamber program. Not. I guess it would have been basically a competitor of the one that he was already involved with. But
Right.
ultimately, though, he came back to me. You guys went and had discussions one night. I remember you had like a date night, and you guys had discussions, and then he came back and said, "No, you know what I really want to do is something about auditioning. I want to teach, he's really, you know, he's kind of a Superman in that he's always had a music job. Like he's never been like a, waiter, he's never walked dogs, he's never had
Yeah.
another job besides being a musician.
He's never, the only time he had another job was when he worked in a bike shop for fun because he loves bikes.
Right. He loves bikes. And so he did that for fun, but he never really did it for money. He did it because he enjoyed it. But essentially he's always been on some level a paid musician, like his whole life, which is really, really rare. That's, so that means that he knows something about auditions that most people don't know. I thought, what a great premise for some kind of teaching people how to audition type of product or program. That's really where it
Hmm.
started, right?
Yes.
So then I come to Raleigh in, right around New Year's, and then of course my brother came, who, he and I worked together. He'll be on the podcast at some point because he's brilliant. But
I'm looking forward to that.
yeah, he's going to be on the
Yeah.
podcast. His name is Ken. He'll be on the podcast because he's so brilliant. He has so much to say, so much to offer. But he was there too, and so we all were sitting at your, kitchen, your dining room table, and we were hammering out, you, me, David, Ken, we're hammering out what this audition thing could be, what this product would end up being. Do you remember?
Yep.
And we
Yeah.
spent hours on it, hours. You know, many, many conversations, and we started to develop it. And it turned into this thing called, can I say the name? You should say the name. It's yours.
Sure.
You should say it.
Audition X Factor.
Yeah.
Audition X Factor. Ken actually thought of the name.
Yeah, Ken thought of the name Audition X Factor. I initially came up with the name Audition Autopsy. Ken thought that was morbid and gross. I don't know. I thought Audition Autopsy was cool, but either one, I liked Audition.
Autopsy.
I know, right? Ken was like, "You got to be kidding me," But anyway, whatever. I thought it was good. So anyway, so you guys ended up. I think Audition X Factor is great. So we ended up creating this thing, and I said, "Okay, so pick the date." We did the same thing that you did with Crushing Classical. I said, "Okay, so pick the date that you're going to do your first event," and it's a live event. We decided it's going to be a live event. We're going to sell people into it. It's going to be kids who want to learn how to audition better. There was positioning for it, of course. I'm, and I could. Do you want me to talk about the positioning at all? How we positioned it?
Absolutely. Share everything.
So, whenever you sell something to the public, it doesn't matter what it is. You have to position it properly. So to just say I'm going to teach you how to audition better is not compelling enough. It's just not. Anyone can promise you to audition better. There was an audition summit recently online that promises that. There are little products you can buy online that say they're going to help you audition better. There's a reason why they're not making big businesses out of that. They're probably not killing it. As we say in the business world, they're not killing it financially. And there's a reason why, because you have to position it in a way that makes people think differently about the thing they want to learn. So the positioning that we came up with was 20% of an audition is how you play. And we all know that. And that's what you get to impact. But there's a whole 80% of auditioning that you have not either used, don't know about, haven't employed yet. And that's what we're going to teach you at the Audition X Factor workshop. So that was the positioning. It wasn't just that we're going to help you audition better, because that's not enough. Everything promises to help you do something better, but you actually have to create a compelling premise or a positioning that somebody's going to want to actually buy that product. And that's what we created, and it worked. The positioning absolutely worked.
I understand. Yeah, and I understand why, because if you just say, I can help you audition better, if it's stuff you already know, you probably sort of think you can do it if you just tried harder.
Right. And also that's not a promise of anything. I'm going to help you audition better. Well, human beings think they know everything. I think that's the first thing you have to remember when you go and sell something is human beings think they already know. So you're always you're always opposing a human being who thinks they already know everything. They think they already know everything there is to know. That's a typical human being. Not every human being thinks that, but most human beings think that. So if you're going to sell something, you have to put together a premise or some kind of positioning that makes them think differently about what they think they already know. It's very important. You're not going to sell it otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Makes them think differently about what they think they already know.
Correct. Makes them think differently about what they think they already know, because you're always in opposition to what they think they already know. And I want to stress what they think they already know. It doesn't mean they already know it. What a human being thinks they know is actually what you're in opposition to, not what they already know. It's two different things. Yep. Because there's ego involved. With a human being, there's always ego involved. What a human being thinks about themselves, what they believe about themselves, what they think they already know about themselves. Okay, and so and someone who's taken 40 auditions, let's say, I'm just making this up. I mean, I know we sold it to kids, but someone who's taken 40 auditions thinks they already know a hell of a lot about auditioning. So if you're not coming up with another premise for them to think about, you're screwed. They're not going to buy from you. They're not,
Right.
So that was the premise. So then there was the, how do we get butts and seats? So first of all, you should know there were 2 events that you guys sold. And Tracy, you should talk here, because you guys are the ones who I wasn't even there. I was here in Phoenix.
So
I was here in Phoenix directing the whole thing, basically from the
yeah,
sideline.
you were directing the whole thing, and essentially you taught David how to do direct sales
I did.
because this wasn't I'm going to throw up a website and then hope that people come and see it
Oh
and then
yeah.
buy it.
Oh, that's so important. Just so you know, don't bother if you want to actually make money for the first time. Don't bother doing the whole throw up a website and people are going to come and they're going to buy from you. It doesn't work like that. That's unicorn thinking. Okay, that's sunshine, rainbows, and unicorns. Get rid of it. It's not going to happen. Okay, 15 years in the business, not going to happen.
Yeah,
Biggest
so okay, so
fallacy
you're
ever.
telling you're telling musicians who not only do they not like to self-promote themselves, classical
Hmm.
musicians are very uncomfortable doing that.
Hmm.
You're saying we need to get on the phone
Yep,
with somebody. No, we need the first step was contacting colleagues who probably had students who might be interested in this.
that's right.
Declaring that this is an amazing program that isn't completely 100% developed yet. This is what David had to
Right.
do. Get on the phone with
That's right.
people.
He had an
And he kept
outline. He had an outline for the workshop or whatever you call it, and nothing else.
yes.
That's all he had.
Yes. And me and you and Ken were like, yeah, this is gonna be great. We're gonna do this, 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 this.
Hmm.
And David was still like, I don't know what I'm selling because all the words that he was actually going to be speaking on the day hadn't been already done because we were still, 3.5, 4 weeks away from the first event. We had time.
Hmm.
But the whole concept of David saying he's going to do something that he doesn't know what it is yet was very uncomfortable for him.
Oh yeah.
And so then he was contacting all of these colleagues, and people were doing email introductions to him, and he was met with resistance from people who were afraid David was trying to steal their students, or
Hmm.
all kinds of different things were coming through on that. And then
He went.
eventually,
He went and
oh,
stood
go
too.
ahead.
I want to say this. He went to a couple of local orchestras, youth orchestras, and he spoke.
Yeah.
So that's
And talked
another thing
about
he
what
did
the
was,
was.
yeah. So he contacted people on the phone and had them do email introductions for him so he could, create, again, it was to create sales calls essentially. It was to create phone calls where he could sell the workshop directly to the participant.
Yes.
And he was
And
doing
so,
that, and he was doing that as well, in front of orchestras. He was like standing in front of the string section and saying, "Hey, listen, I've got this amazing workshop. It's called Audition X Factor. This is the premise, blah, 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 blah." He was doing, so he was doing all kinds of things to create interest in this workshop.
yep. And what we soon discovered was that you can't just sell something to a child because they need to tell their parents, and if they forget to tell their parents, then it's dead.
That's correct.
So,
So I'm going to interrupt you for a second. That speaks to what wallet are you selling to? If you're going to make money, if you're going to create income, you have to remember which wallet is paying for it. A 13-year-old kid doesn't have a wallet. Their parent does. So you have to create a bridge somehow. If you are going to sell to parents, you have to create that bridge. And that was one challenge you guys had along the way.
yes, that was a challenge. But then the other part is when a parent gets on the phone, they don't necessarily want to make decisions because people don't want to make decisions.
Right.
So they would say, "Oh, let me go talk." One of the first sales calls David had, the mother said, "Well, let me go ask Johnny if he wants to do it, and I'll get back to you."
Uh-huh.
So then,
Then
Mrs.
he got
Jones talks to little,
right, and then he got on the
and
phone with me. Then he got on the phone with me, and I said, "No, no, 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 no. You need to get Johnny and Mrs. Jones on the same call, and they need to come to an agreement, and the sale gets made there."
exactly, because the first time that happened, Mrs. Jones got back with Devin and said, "Yeah, Johnny doesn't want to do it, but thanks."
Well, because
So that
and
didn't
the
that,
reason why that didn't work, by the way, is because Mrs. Jones went to try and sell Johnny in her most ineffective way, in her least, because she doesn't know how to sell, right? She's not like, Johnny, there's this amazing blah, 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 and you got to do this, and da, 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 da. Remember, you sucked at your last audition, and blah, 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 and you were crying, and you got to do this. It's amazing. She didn't sell like that. She said, so I just talked to this guy, and he's got this thing, and do you want to do it? It's on Saturday. I know you like to play baseball on Saturday.
The whole day.
Yeah. It's going to take the whole day. You're going to kill your Saturday, But anyway, do you want to do it? And little Johnny said, hell no. That's what happened.
Right. Exactly.
That's what
So
happened.
as soon as he started getting exactly what happened, and as soon as started getting on the phone with the mom or the mom and the dad and the kid,
Yeah.
it was a totally different story. And
That's when
David would say like,
that's when it started.
that's when the selling happened.
Yep.
Yeah, and he was able to sell the entire first workshop and half the second.
Yep. Yep.
And then after the first one,
and I know he bled for that. Like I know he put in a lot of hours to get that done.
It was not easy living with David during that time.
Oh, I love it when my program ideas are the source of marital strife. It brings me joy. I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. But seriously, like that. But this is what it is, though. This is what creating income is. This is what it looks like. It looks like a mess. It looks like you screw it up the first time. It looks like you're selling something you don't necessarily know what it is. You don't have all your shit together. That's what it looks like. That's what creating income looks. It's a mess. That's what it is.
And it was stressful because we had to make sure we had the space. So we signed a contract that we would pay for that space. So David's going, I need butts in these chairs because I don't want to have to pay for the space and not have people,
Yeah, that's another thing is you declare the date, you book the hall, and then you're like, holy crap, if we don't sell the seats, we got to pay for the hall and we got to pay for it with our own bank account. Oops.
So that's putting the pressure on.
It is. It creates a situation that you really can't get out of. And that's actually the best situation to be in where incomes, that's where that whole wake up, at 4:00 in the morning thing comes for me. Like I have promises that I have to keep. And, that's why I start working when it's dark. That's a fact.
Yeah.
So I get it.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So let's fast forward a little bit. So you do the first workshop and, and I know it was hell leading into it. We won't go into, the details of the hell that it was, but so the first workshop happens, that was in January, right?
It was in February.
I'm sorry,
11th.
February. So, and then, after it's over, I'm like, I'm at Sprouts and I'm shopping. I remember the Sunday morning that, it was on a Saturday. And I remember on the Sunday morning, I'm all waking up and I'm like, okay, we're going to improve the workshop and we're going to this. And now we got to contact these people. And I'm like, I'm like living the workshop over here,
Mm-hmm.
super. I mean, that I was excited. I'm like, oh, because seriously, this business could have become, it really could become like a $500,000 or more business. It really could. And I mean, just based on the premise alone, it could. And the interest that was there, there was a lot of interest in this.
Right.
And so, I find out that I think what was happening, David was doing the back room. He was like cleaning the back room or something during the renovation.
Yeah, he didn't want to dive in. Well, we're finishing up this construction and he was painting or something. And he didn't want to he wanted to relax. He did not want to talk about like anything about it. He just wanted to take the day off.
He wanted to take the day off. And I'm going to tell you, that's the first, I want to speak to that for a minute because I'm over here creating the future of Audition X Factor in my head while I'm shopping, for my weekly groceries at Sprouts. And they're over there, David is over there in particular, because this was his deal. David's over there painting and wanting to take a day off. And I'm going to tell you something. That's the first sign, by the way, that you might not be doing the right thing. If you're not excited about it, because seriously, if you're in it and you're in it to win it and you really want to pursue it, it's what you eat, live, sleep, breathe, whatever. I'm serious. That's how it works. And if you're not that, then it's probably not for you.
Right.
Comments?
Well, yeah. And so, and you know what, like you said, um, okay, so where should we go from here? Should I speak to the $500,000 business or any of that stuff, or
But
should
that
I, or should
no,
we
no,
move
no.
on?
You don't
Okay.
even have to speak to that. I think, there was a decision that had to be made. I think, and I saw it right away. I don't know if you saw it right away, but I saw it right away that on that Sunday, right after Audition X Factor, I thought, okay, somebody has to make a decision here. Are you guys going to continue this business, or are you just going to drop it? And by the way, there was already another workshop scheduled in March, and there were half of it was already filled.
That's right. And so, and we were all already also talking about one in April. And so, so
Right, and
that
I
decision
was
has,
pushing you, and I was pushing you guys to set that April date because I thought they're going to go with this. But when I saw David's reaction, when I saw how he was being on that Sunday, I just want to relax. I just want to paint the back room. I thought this ain't for him.
yeah, it was a lot of work, and he has a full-time orchestra job that he's on the road a lot, and it was exhausting for him. It just
But
wasn't.
but that isn't it though. What you're saying is because of his job, because of his this, because that's nonsense. He wasn't in it because he wasn't in it. It's not a circumstance that made him not into Audition X Factor. It was that he wasn't in it. You get
Yeah,
that?
he wasn't in it all the whole package of it.
Yeah.
He actually likes doing the workshop part, but it's all the stuff leading up to it, which is necessary.
Well, all the stuff leading up to it is the workshop. That's what you got to get. Making the workshop better, making the sales calls, securing people, going and promoting it. That's what the business is. The business isn't the workshop. The workshop is the result of all that other work that the business actually is.
Hmm.
Does that make sense to you? I want to make sure everybody understands the workshop is not the business. It's everything else that it gets produced, that where a workshop gets produced, that is the actual business. Calling,
Yeah.
selling, promoting, writing emails, following up, securing seats, getting venues booked, planning the workshop, saying, practicing what you're going to say. That's the business. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah. So for you to say, well, he has this stressful job and he this and he that and he this, that's nonsense. He just wasn't interested in the business, period. That's it.
Hmm.
Right. But people don't like to people don't like to be straight about these things. They don't like to be upfront about these things. But that's really what was going on. Everybody blames it. All my kids, all my this, all my that, all my life. No, you're just not interested, period.
Yes.
There's nothing wrong with being honest about that. You know what I mean? And so at that point, this is where I want to go with it, is at that point, I said to you, okay, so, and you saw already when you were preparing this with him, you saw already that he wasn't into it. You knew that.
Yeah. Yeah, it was like I was dragging him through it.
Yeah, and so at one point I said to you, well, you could, you don't need David. You could take this over.
Hmm.
Yes?
That's exactly what happened, and I said, "Yeah, I'll do it." I've already kind of been doing it. Um, and I just said yes. Sometimes I have a tendency to think I can do more things than I really can
Mm-hmm.
and keep my sanity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said yes, and I decided that I was going to finish filling up March and fill April and
And
help.
you decided also that you were going to take over. I mean, you were going to be like the CEO of this whole thing of Audition X Factor.
Yeah,
That's
and
really
that
what
he
you
could help
decided.
me with, yeah, yeah, I decided
Well,
that.
and I
And
think
then
I
I was like,
suggested. I think I suggested you can pay him to be a judge for the audition section. For when people audition at the workshop.
yeah,
I said you could just pay him to be a judge, and I think you sort of laughed at that, like, "Ha ha, that's hilarious." And I'm like, "No, I'm actually not kidding." you know, he could
right.
just be a judge, and I think that probably could have worked out fine, actually.
Yeah, it could have. But so essentially what we decided to do was that, and I started working on it. And at a certain point, you said, but this Crushing Classical will have to be on the back burner for a little bit. That's what you
Yep,
said. It's just a
yep,
matter of fact.
yep.
And
Hmm.
so
Well,
that's what I
you
did. And
understand why, because you had a date scheduled, you had butts and seats. You had to fill the rest of the butts and seats. I mean, there was a lot of work to do. The workshop had to be retooled. There were a lot of things to do.
There were a lot of things to do. And at a certain point, I had a breakdown over it.
It wasn't very long after that, actually. It was about a week afterward that you had the breakdown, about a week to a week and a half.
Yeah, I just
Within
was,
10 days of deciding to take it over, you had a total meltdown.
yeah, because I was doing, it just didn't feel right to me. This was David's. It was born to be David's. It was created out of his, who we were saying he was, like this Superman who never had a job outside of an orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't mine.
Yep.
And that affected me greatly. And it was very hard, I have to say.
Well, what does affected me greatly mean? Because nobody knows what that means, and neither do I.
Okay, well, I wasn't paying attention to Crushing Classical at all. I was stressed about getting enough people in the seats.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't raise the price for the third one when I wasn't, I wasn't, I think I knew that we were supposed to raise the price, but I wasn't in that conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Initially, and so I raised the price like $10, and then you were like, "No."
Yeah, I mean, because the original price for everybody who's listening, the original price was $175, and I told David, and Tracy wasn't in this conversation. I was talking to him. I told David, in your next, your April workshop, you need to raise it to, I think I said what, 250?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I said raise it to 250, and I think he thought I was nuts, but he didn't pass on that information to Tracy. So when she decided to raise the price, we didn't have any conversations about it. I didn't know she was raising it, and then suddenly I went to her and I said, "Hey, listen, if you haven't sold April yet, we got to make sure to raise that price to 250." And she's like, "What?" And here's the thing: 175 to 185. Let's just be clear. It's a workshop. It's a day-long workshop. 175 to 185, that's not a price increase. 175 to 250 is a price increase for a workshop, a one-day workshop. If you're talking about a haircut, a $10 increase, okay, that's substantial. You're talking about a workshop, a $10 increase, not substantial. It doesn't mean anything. When you raise the price in something like this, what you're implying is demand. That's what raising the price is. Raising the price implies demand in our world, in our culture, the way things are. And so when she raised it to 185, remember, she lives in Raleigh. One of the things I said to her is the big problem with only raising it to 185 is now you're getting another 20 kids or 25 kids, whatever, into this workshop, and you just blew through 25 kids paying 185, whereas you could have blown through another 25 kids paying 250. That's how a business grows. A business grows because you add money to it, not because you're going to run through all the people in Raleigh. It's a small city. It's not like Phoenix. Look, I could run this, Audition X Factor in Phoenix for, 3 years and still not run through everybody because it's such a big city. You know what I mean?
Right. So, and this is something we probably will disagree on. And you said you wanted to disagree more on Fireside Chats. So, but I was thinking that $250 was going to be, people were going to think that was insane for a kid who may or may not even want to be a musician.
This is the difference between you and me. The difference between you and me is you sell on price and I sell on value. So in order for you to sell a $250 workshop, you need to raise the value of the conversation you're having about it. If you can sell anything at any price, if you have a conversation that matches the value of the dollar amount. If you're not going to raise the level of your conversation and raise the value proposition in the conversation you're having, people are not going to pay $250. So your problem was never the price. Your problem was that you battled increasing the level of conversation you were going to have on that sales call. You didn't want to come up against opposition. That was your problem.
Yeah, that's part of it.
Period. That was it. Seriously, that was it. You knew that you were going to come up against resistance in that sales call. And all you were thinking about was, I assert, that all you were thinking about was, well, they're just going to say no because they don't know if little Johnny wants to become a musician. That's not what you're selling. You're not selling little Johnny becoming a musician someday. You're selling little Johnny not having a freaking meltdown after his next 5 auditions because he sucked ass.
That's true.
You got to understand what you're selling. If you want to raise the price of something, you need to understand the value of what you're selling. That's my point. You could have sold it at $250, no problem, but you would have had to raise the level of skill in your conversation to have $250 make it through.
Well, and I see what you're saying now because as the adults that I met had the conversation with me about their child having meltdowns after auditions and not being prepared and not knowing how to prepare and all that stuff, they're stressed about it. They don't want to see their kid going through that.
That's right. They don't want their kid to have a meltdown. That's what you're selling. You're not selling little Johnny's going to become a music major. We don't give a shit what little Johnny's going to become. What we care about is that they're not going to have to watch their kid have yet another meltdown after an audition. That was the whole. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I see it now.
Totally could have sold it at $250. Totally could have sold it at $250. And listen, part of it is, getting that level of skill. Certainly I would have gotten on a call with you to raise that level of skill you would have had on that call, but you would have had to be interested, first of all, in being in that business. And I think at the end of the day, that's where you landed is, I'm not interested in being in this business. This is not the business for me.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened.
And so they had their last workshop. They just had it actually the past weekend. And it went well, and now it's done. That's it. We're, Audition X Factor is, 6 feet under.
It's time to do an autopsy.
It's time to do an autopsy. Now we can call it Audition Autopsy right here. Now we can call it that.
We just did the autopsy on Audition X Factor.
That's right. That was it. But listen, no, seriously, one thing I never really got to say this to you because we didn't really, I know we debriefed the event, but one thing I wanted to say, to both you and David is just I acknowledge you for taking a chance. Even though it wasn't the right business for either one of you, you guys did something that very few people do is you stepped absolutely out of your comfort zones, and you got on the phone with people, you had conversations, you gained skills that you never would have gotten any other way. And you took a shot. It wasn't the right shot for you. It's not the right business for you, but the fact that you did it is so much more than anyone else would do. And I just acknowledge you for that.
Thank you.
I think you guys did a great job.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. It's funny because I could see the value, and there were things about it that were really, really rewarding for me.
Mm-hmm.
So,
totally.
And I think actually through me recognizing that this wasn't for me, led me to really say, what do I really want? What I really want is to really focus my efforts on crushing classical, because this is where I feel that my soul is.
Mm-hmm.
And it had an effect on.
Yeah, I think it made you more committed to crushing classical at the end of the day.
It did.
I really do, because I saw a real shift in you after that happened. And I'm talking about before the workshop even happened. I'm talking about when you decided, okay, this is going to be our last Audition X Factor workshop. It was really at that point that you just went through the motions of doing the workshop and putting it on and, having the event happen, but you didn't, I saw you invest more in crushing classical after that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Sometimes the wrong thing leads you to the right thing.
That's true.
That's
totally true.
I really think that. And so the other thing too, I think that's important to mention here is that doing anything for money is not enough. I know, people want top 5 jobs in orchestras because they're going to make 6 figures in many cases, or high 5 figures. There comes a point when money is not enough, when money is not happiness. Money is a necessity, but it is not the definite. It will not make you happy. There's no amount of money. Like, you guys could have done very, very well with Audition X Factor, but it doesn't make a difference if you hate the business or if you don't want to be in the business. Making money in any way that isn't in alignment for you it's never going to work. It's not going to sustain. You'll quit. You'll eventually quit.
I agree. And I never knew what that really meant
Hmm. I know you
until
didn't.
I experienced it.
I know you didn't because you thought that, I told you about when Ken and I did the, real estate investing information business way back when, and we were doing seven figures. And you're like, why did you quit? What did you do? What were you thinking? And I said, because we both didn't like the business. It just wasn't the business we want to be. And you're like, but Eileen, you were making so much money. And it's like, that wasn't enough.
I get it now.
It wasn't enough. I mean, it doesn't matter how much money you're making if you hate making it that way. It doesn't matter.
Absolutely.
There's a
I
lot
know.
of really unhappy people right now in jobs that they hate. They may be making really great money, but they hate their life and they hate their job. It's just you're eventually going to burn out. Your
Yeah.
candle's going to go out. It will. So anyway, so that's the conversation, and I think we can talk a little bit more about viability. We did a little bit today. We talked a little bit more about what the wallets you're selling to. That's what makes something viable. By the way, is what someone's willing to pay for it is what makes it viable. But also the whole idea of a premise. Having positioning. Coming up with an idea, but coming up with the positioning for it that would make a human being want it. Again, not having anything to do with why you think they would want it, but it has to be something above what they think they already know. You have to introduce a concept that has them question what they think they already know. And that's a very big part of something viable and a viable income source for you.
Totally. Yeah, we're gonna keep talking about viability because it's kind of new
It is new, and it's
information.
a very heady concept. It's a very, very heady concept. And I think it's going to come up in
It is.
just about every talk that we do, you know?
Yeah, and I think there's more to talk about within the change topic that we brought up too.
Yeah.
There's a lot more about that. So, what should we talk about on the next fireside chat, Eileen?
Um, I'm not really sure, actually. There's nothing really that's sticking out to me, but what I know is that whenever we communicate during the week, there's always cool things that come up. I have a feeling that's where it's going to come up because it's not coming up for me right now, what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I agree. So, watch the posts because on Facebook I will give hints in posts about what we'll be talking about on the next fireside chat.
Yeah, actually, we'll probably allude to it. I'm sure we'll allude to it.
I can't wait. I'm hoping to hear back from some people after they hear this episode about what they
Yeah,
thought.
guys. Yeah, man,
There's
get
a
some
lot
fire
of
under your ass.
there's
Fireside chat means fire under your ass. Let's go.
let's go.
Let's
And
see
I
it.
think I think some of the topics today should be poking and prodding at some people because
I hope so. I really hope that, I want to see some fire come out of this audience. You guys have things to say, and you have things you want to do, especially, and also if you're listening to this, you know, there's magic for you available on a hot seat. Not too many people have offered or sorry volunteered to do hot seats, and you guys are making a mistake. If there's one thing that I know how to find in you and talk out of you, it's your greatness. And you can't necessarily see it. It's very difficult to see the outside of your own box. It's difficult for me to see the outside of my own box. I can see the inside of it, but not necessarily the outside of it. And that's one of my gifts. So if you've been avoiding doing a hot seat, if you have been thinking about doing a hot seat, you should do a hot seat. Get in touch with us. Send us a private message.
absolutely. I will second that that is Eileen's gift. I've seen her do it numerous times for people, and I'm always flabbergasted by how amazing it could be if the person actually did it. So,
How amazing it
because it
could
takes
be.
action.
Yeah.
What?
I said how amazing it
No,
could be if somebody
exactly.
actually, right?
Because
Take a
they have to take
chance.
action on it,
Yeah, take a
right? The
chance,
act.
man. Take a chance. There could be something really, there could be something really great unearthed on that call, and all because you're not willing to have a conversation about it. It's not being unearthed. And by the way, don't be embarrassed about having a conversation on a podcast. We're sitting here. I have no idea what you people think of me. For real. I just went on multiple rants on this call, and I'm very well aware of that. And whatever. This is who I am. There's a lot of experience behind what I'm saying here. There's a lot of, obviously opinion certainly, but my point of view comes from it's informed. It comes from experience, knowledge, skill, all the different things I've done. Um, you know, have some balls. Like, if there's nothing wrong with being vulnerable in front of people. And that's what I think you can really learn from this. Of all things, you can really learn it from this.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely. So just do it is all I'm
do it.
saying. Do it.
Just do it.
Do
Be
it.
like Nike. Just do it.
Right. Exactly. All right. Thank you so much, Eileen. This
Thank
was a
you.
great chat. If you are loving Crushing Classical, please go on iTunes and write a review for us. And check us out at facebook.com/Crushing Classical. Coming soon is our website. We'll be keeping you posted on when it's ready. And come and join the conversation. Make some comments, share some posts, and let's get her rolling.
Let's do it.
All right. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
See you next time. Bye. You start.
I just pressed record already.
Okay, great. So it starts with me laughing. Okay, so
That's good.
I'm going to let you start. You just go.
Okay, so this is after the show. This is after the show we just had, and the Fireside Chat number 3. Eileen and I were just discussing Audition X Factor, and I need to get back on with Eileen and talk about something else that didn't come out during the show. So.
Yeah, so there was this weird thing that was happening on the Fireside Chat we just did, which was that I felt, I was talking and I made some points, whatever, and then I would turn it over to Tracy and there would be silence. And then when she spoke, it was like she had this very low energy level, and I noticed it. And I didn't call it out during the Fireside because I didn't want to embarrass her, of course. And so, but I didn't understand what that was. And so when we got off the Fireside Chat, I said, "What was going on with you? Like, there was something weird." And of course, there's some technical things. There's some reasons why we do things that we do on the Fireside Chat, because we want to do promotions for it, whatever. Like, there has to be some silence in there, whatever. But there was more to it than that. It was that she was actually concealing something. And so, Tracy, just say what was going on,
When we were digging into talking about Audition X Factor and you really wanted to know why I didn't want to continue doing it, I was very uncomfortable because it was a little bit tied in with Crushing Classical. At a certain point, I had a meltdown, as we referred to in the chat, and during Audition X Factor when I decided to take it over. And what happened was I essentially felt like, wow, I'm really not cut out for business. I must not be cut out for business.
Yeah, so it's interesting because, I say what you could have said, it doesn't matter. The Fireside Chat was what it was, but I think it's really important that you just acknowledge how hard it is to create an income when you've never lived like that. But I mean, I know you've been a freelancer, I know you've done gigs, whatever, but what you did with Audition X Factor was very different, and it was super uncomfortable for you. I know that.
It was very uncomfortable.
Yeah. And I think, the thing that she wasn't saying that we sort of figured out after we had our Fireside Chat was that she just, she was even uncomfortable talking about how uncomfortable she actually was.
Yeah.
And I want you to say a little bit about that. What was the meltdown about? Are you willing to talk about that? What was the meltdown you had when you said, okay, I'm going to take over Audition X Factor. Deva doesn't want to do it anymore. Now I'm going to take it over. And then about a week to 10 days after you said that, you had this meltdown. Can you talk a little bit about what that was so they understand?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Part of it was the amount of pressure that I felt to raise the price and grow it and sell it to more people and find enough people and put myself in that situation where I was going to be calling people and selling something more valuable, as you said, knowing that I would have to value it up, make it 10 times better than it was the first time. And how was I going to do that? Putting myself in that situation where I was going to say, yeah, we used to charge $175, but now we're start charging $250 for it. Yep. And that
it's
rejection.
Ballsy. It's ballsy.
It would have been ballsy. And I was nervous to put myself in a situation where I'd already reserved a hall and now I had to, make this other thing happen. It was going to be a more intense sales call, which I didn't feel prepared for. And after the Fireside Chat, I told Eileen, she said, are you telling me pressure? You said, are you telling me pressure it makes you uncomfortable and you can't handle it? And I said, no, because I've played really hard pieces before where I didn't know how, new music. I didn't know how to count or write a spring, the last page or whatever. Like there's
Write a
there's
spring, the entire last page.
it's true. It's really fucking true. But um I still can't count the last page. But anyway, besides that, like I know that I can at least figure it out because I have so much training as a musician that I know that I can always figure out what I need to figure out in order to deliver. And for some reason, and when I say it like that, I go, I'm a smart person. I probably could have figured out the sales calls, but
And you had me.
and I had you. But
Right.
at that point, I chose to go in a really dark place and say, wow, I'm not cut out for business. This isn't for me. I'm too old for this. I can't figure out this new thing.
Mhm.
This is so much pressure. I can't handle it.
Yeah.
Um, and I got freaked out, really
It's
freaked
all
out.
human. This is all human. This is going to happen to everybody. Everyone's going to go through this. If you haven't already, you're going to go through the I'm not cut out for this. I don't think I can. I mean, there was even a point at this, and she told me this, when we got off the first fireside chat, that she was even questioning whether or not she could do Crushing Classical. Like she really, what her words were, and I wrote them down. She said, I started to think I was incapable of being a business owner. That's what she said.
That's what I said. And I was ready to give up all of it. But then there was something as I started to look at it and reflect on it, I realized what the real problem was is that Audition X Factor wasn't my business
It
and
wasn't,
Crushing
yeah, it
Classical,
wasn't it for you. And that's
it
another
wasn't.
thing. Yeah, it wasn't it for you, but also there was something else that came out a little bit ago that I want you to share, which is that you said I said, so why Crushing Classical and not Audition X Factor? And she said, I'll let you say it, Tracy,
I said Crushing Classical is who I am.
is who I am. And I think that's a really interesting distinction to make. And I said, what do you mean by that? And she said some really interesting things, starting with, and I'll let you continue, Tracy, was, um, I've wanted to change the face of classical music my whole life. I think is what something along you said that.
Yeah, I always felt like there could be cool. I've always dreamed about interesting concerts that were geared more because one of the things about me that is really part of who I am is I enjoy socializing and being out and being in cool atmospheres. Like I love going to new restaurants. One of my
Yeah,
favorite things to do is do that
me
in
too.
big cities like New York or Chicago. Like
Oh,
I just love
yeah,
atmosphere. I love it. And so I've always dreamed of having concerts that combined that kind of interesting atmosphere that you'd find in like a new hip restaurant in a concert,
yeah.
and I'd always dreamed about it for as long as I can remember. And I didn't, and I feel like that there's so much possibility in that realm. And as we move forward in Crushing Classical, and I feel like, wow, I can really affect change and talk about how this can actually maybe happen if more musicians realize that they have the power to do things that they dream of.
Yeah.
How great would that be? It felt like part of my DNA or something. And
Well,
so like
I think that's interesting, and I think that's what everyone needs to find. And I didn't understand that even for you about Crushing Classical. I didn't realize that Crushing Classical and what it stands for is actually who you are. The first time I really heard you say that was like, 10 minutes ago.
I know I was surprised when you were like, "Really?" Yeah, because I
Yeah, I
never
know.
shared that. And I used to share my dreams about those kind of events with people and other musicians, and they'd always, poo-poo it like that. How are you going to do that? And you can't how are you going to rent 200 velvet couches or like I don't know, but it would be cool if people could sit on velvet couches while they listen to, Debussy or something. Like I just had these cool like I just loved daydreaming about it
Hmm.
since as long as I can remember because I'm obsessed with cool places to hang out and music. And I love music. And so I just, I don't know, it just felt like part of me. And so when I thought, okay, Audition X Factor, the experience I had with it must mean that I'm not a very good business owner and I can't handle having a business, I went into a pretty deep depression for a couple of days, like for real.
Yeah, I know. I know. I remember. I remember. I mean,
I was avoiding
I honestly
Eileen.
thought you were going to quit the whole thing, like everything. I really
I
did.
avoided you for a couple of days.
Oh, I know you did. I'm very well. You think I didn't know that? Please. Come on now. I totally knew. And you know what was funny is I just let you do that. It didn't, I just let you do it. You just had to be there wherever you were in that dark place because you can't bring somebody out of a dark place. They have to bring themselves out of it. You can't take somebody out,
Yeah.
you know? So I left you there. I knew that you would eventually come out of it. And by the way, how I knew you were in a dark place is because you would text me back one word answers. You think I didn't know what was going on? Because normally you're like, and then all of a sudden I'm getting one word answers back. I would ask you a question, one word answer. Ask you a question, yup. Ask you a question, no. Ask
I
you
never said no. Come on, I would have just write back no.
I'm pretty sure you wrote back no. I would have to scroll back. No, but seriously, I totally knew that you were in a dark place, and I just knew that you would eventually crawl out of it. You know, when somebody's in a hole, you got to let them sit there until they're ready to crawl out. It's just the way that works. So, I mean,
Yeah, so
I think the biggest thing, though, I just, when you can say, and I said this to you before, you can say when you're uncomfortable with something, and I want everybody to feel that way. There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm having a shitty time. This is really uncomfortable for me to talk about. This is the ugly part that I don't really want to admit, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. There's nothing wrong with that.
right. Right. And I'm glad that we're back on here doing a brief interlude or postlude
Yeah.
essentially after the show
Yeah.
type of thing because yeah, it's true. I didn't want to talk about it. And so I want to say that now I am talking about it. Before I wanted it to be over. Eileen will stop talking about this soon and we can end this podcast.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
I can't do
and
that.
that, I know, and it's funny because I didn't know what was going on over there with you, but I knew something was going on, and that's why I dug, like as soon as we got off the chat, I like immediately dug into it. What was that about? You know?
Yeah. So I'm I'm not going to do that again. If that happens on one of these things again, I'll say how I'm feeling, you know.
Well, and it just makes
It
it
was
more
a real sore
real.
spot. It was just a real sore spot
Yeah,
for
I
that.
get. Well, and it just happened. I realize. I mean,
It did. It did.
I mean, it's really fresh. I'm sure if we talked about it 3 months from now, you'd be giggling about it. It wouldn't be a big deal.
For sure. Yeah, for
I
sure.
think
And you know what?
distance. Yeah.
One point I want to make is that I don't remember if I said this before, but the that from the depths of that place, I really realized that crushing classical was it,
Hmm.
and it was what I wanted to do, And I also really knew that you and I needed to be partners through
Yeah.
that experience. I
Well,
told you
yeah.
that.
Well, and we were able to talk through it in a way. I mean, I think we got into a very serious discussion about partnership at that point because I was really sort of, and this is what I do. I mean, I'm not going to say I forced you to make a decision, but I threw a gauntlet down and said, you need to choose. I definitely did that. I
Yeah, and you and I were it was on the table sort of that
hmm
we may partner or we may work together in some way, shape, or form.
hmm
But then it became, who are you in this project? And we're either going to be partners or we're not going to be partners.
Yeah. I mean, at that point, you know, it had to happen. It was either going to happen or it wasn't going to happen right at that point, I think.
Yeah.
You know,
So in a way, it was a good thing, right?
it
The
was. I
stories
mean, I think
are
it
both
worked.
bad and
Yeah, no,
good.
I think everything happens the right way at the right time always. And I'm just really glad that we're able to get back on here and talk through this because The one thing that I was saying to Tracy, I want everybody in this audience to be free to express themselves. I mean, in every way, you've got to find your self-expression somewhere, and
Mm-hmm.
you got to be able to speak freely. And it starts with us. It starts with us being honest about and unconcealing what may or may not be concealed.
Yes.
you know so I appreciate you, being willing to get back and do it after the show, just to talk about what all that, you know the whole hopefully this podcast will end soon thing. That's all I got.
Well, I don't want to be vulnerable. No one does, right? No one wants to be vulnerable in front of people. And
It's hard.
but then at the same time, we're musicians. We're supposed to be putting ourselves, on the line with our music and everything. And then at the same time, we want everyone to think that we're in a good mood all the time, or we won't get hired back, or all this other shit that we do,
Hmm.
and let's start being real and let's start creating what we actually want that's really coming from who we are.
I agree. I agree. So that's that.
That's that.
That's a
Wrap
wrap.
of the show. That's a wrap. Okay, I'm glad we did that. I'm glad we did it now while it was still raw.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Raw is a good word.
raw. Yeah.
Raw.
Yikes.
Okay,
All
cool. All right, kids. Have an awesome day. Have an awesome day.
right. Have a great day, guys.
Talk to you later.
Okay, bye.
Bye.